real stories of werewolves, of Dogman history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
Dogman Baby Boy. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I used to have a baby Dogman. This was in 2009 through early 2010. He was cute, but destructive and manic. I guess that's true of all healthy puppies, and this guy was no different. We got to be close, but that didn't mean I was ever really safe around him while he was that young. I was always covered in scratches and bite marks, always bandaged up and making excuses to my friends about how I walked through a rose bush or whatever. One of the people I knew suspected I was doing it to myself, while another wondered if I had a secret relationship with someone who wasn't being nice to me. I guess it was a bit of both, ironically, as I quickly loved that little Dogman pup, as though he were my own little baby boy. The forested area behind my home in those days was being used by some well-armed men who appeared to be operating some sort of farm they tended mostly at night. All the neighbors had our theories, but clearly they were growing something they weren't supposed to be, and they were very abrupt, paranoid, unhappy, and cranky men. We never reported them, even though we were scared of them. Well, I didn't report them because I was scared of them. We were all quite happy when they eventually moved out to parts unknown, but in those days, I had gotten used to random gunfire and explosions in the woods at night. I don't know if people were trying to rob their crops or maybe they were just violent lunatics, but in either case I don't miss them. So when I first found this young Dogman creature back during that era, he was sick and lying under a bush just past the end of my property. I didn't know what kind of creature he was, but I immediately thought he had been poisoned or injured in some way by those evil men, and I felt a responsibility to see if I could help him or her. At first I thought I was looking at the largest gray squirrel I had ever seen, but when I looked closer I could tell he was some kind of a canine, although a breed I was unfamiliar with. I went and got a small dog carrier from my house, which I used to use with a pet who had left us some time earlier. I carefully moved this sick gray creature into the carrier, brought him out to the edge of my property where I could care for him a little more easily, and left the carrier open facing toward the woods. This way, if the creature's mother smelled him during the night, she could come retrieve him, or if he felt better, he could get up and leave. I fed him liquids from a needleless syringe the first 2 days, and we bonded like mother and son. He was so helpless that I had no idea what a little devil he would prove to be. But I did get him healthy again, and by day 4, I guess it was, he was tailing after me all around the house, barking at me whenever I went anywhere he didn't want me to go. He was already the boss of the house, at least in his own puppy brain. But just because he was the boss didn't mean that he didn't want to destroy all he surveyed. He ate a pair of my shoes that had cost me $80, but I managed to rescue all the rest of my footwear before he could get to any of that. He tore apart a garbage can, and I went and bought a bear-proof plastic can just for my kitchen. He was a menace, but he was a cute little devil. This puppy did a trick from early on, like from the second or third week that I knew him, where he would walk around on his back legs. It would make me laugh out loud. He looked just like a little man with a dog head. It was around that time when I started noticing how strange his paws were. It almost looked like he had thumbs. They were not normal dog paws. I guess you could say they were almost like bear paws plus a thumb, if you can visualize that. His claws were long, and he was able to rip things up so effectively with them that I got him a doghouse out back to sleep in before the end of the first month with me. I remember trying to make an insurance claim at one point for all the destruction he had caused, and then it was almost $700 worth of damage, not counting his expenses like puppy chow. The insurance company told me that I wasn't covered for the kind of damage he caused, and that puppy really caused some hardships in my life for a while, I'm sorry to say. When I started telling my work friends about him, some felt I should get rid of him, but they never actually came over and looked into his puppy dog eyes. I think if they had, they'd have fallen for him just the same as I did. Although it was like having an insane giant squirrel with dagger claws living in my home, it was also a relief to my personal sadness and depression. When he would get tired and just fall asleep on my lap, I would forget all the trouble he had caused. When he slept, he looked just like a little angel. Then as soon as he was up, that devilish grin took over his face, and I knew he was about to get back to causing trouble just for the fun of it. My jewelry started to go missing from my bedroom, and for some reason I didn't think it had anything to do with the little rat hound with hands. Since nothing was messed up in my room, I just kept thinking I must have absent-mindedly taken the jewelry off someplace other than where I ordinarily did it. But one morning just before dawn, I woke up to see him jump off my dresser and onto the floor, rushing out of my room. I thought I was still dreaming when I noticed that he was running off with a family heirloom, clutching it greedily like Gollum or Smeagle from The Lord of the Rings. So that was where my jewelry had gone. I pulled on my robe and I chased him downstairs, where he jumped out a window he had torn out the screen of and ran into the woods with my heirloom, faster than I'm ever going to move outside of an engine-driven vehicle. Somewhere in those woods, this little bugger was stashing all my jewelry. So that was how he got his nickname Smeagle. He was a cutie, but he was also a creepy and crooked little thief. One day when I had to go to the supermarket, I thought I had locked him into a room with some food and water in a litter box. Believe it or not, he seemed to naturally go in the litter box without me even having to train him. He preferred going there over any place except, the throw rug in my bedroom, which was definitely his favorite. Anyway, as I said, I thought I had left him home locked in that room. But when I opened my tote bag at the supermarket to get my wallet out popped this little wild-eyed baby werewolf head with my wallet in his teeth. The cashier screamed and Smeagle growled as we played tug-of-war with my money and my credit cards. I remember one time the house got so quiet that I knew that dog was up to something bad. I searched until I finally found him inside the laundry bin, chewing holes into what was once my favorite sweater, while looking up at me with those big, innocent, evil monster eyes. I felt so sad about my sweater being history that I wanted to cry, but Smeagle made sad noises along with me in a sympathetic way, and I just had to pick him up and give him a big hug. He was always happy when I was happy, and sad when I was sad. He never seemed to understand that it was usually him making me sad. But I could tell he was a good soul, and he had good intentions, even if he wasn't the smartest giant squirrel dog in the litter. One day I came home from work to realize he had figured out how to get into the refrigerator. All the food had been pulled out onto the floor. All the liquids had been poured out too, and judging by how sticky his fur was, the unintelligent little mongrel had rolled around in whatever he had spilled. Leftovers were spoiling on the floor, and the mess had attracted flies through the screen he had torn a big hole into, which I hadn't had a chance to replace by that point. When I had come home, he had greeted me excitedly, leading me back to the kitchen to show me what he had done. It was as if he expected me to be as happy about all my food being ruined as he was. Instead, I had a lot of cleaning and mopping to do, and then I drew a bubble bath for a certain Mr. Troublemaking dog. I did succeed in getting the little monster into the water and suds, but not for long. After he got out of the tub and pushed me into it, I realized that Smeagle could not stay inside with me any longer. The first night I came home from work after I gave him a doghouse in the backyard, I found my entire garden torn up. I don't think I've ever seen such a thorough job in my life. He did not leave one single plant living. They were all utterly torn apart, as though they were each his mortal enemy. But he was just so cute, I'm telling you, you wouldn't have been able to stay mad either. It was my own fault for not covering the young garden in barbed wire meshing. I mean, what was I thinking of? He was a teenaged Dogman. One day I noticed that Smeagle had gotten really big really fast. I was glad that I had invested in that doghouse for larger dogs, although I hadn't expected him to be Great Dane size in just a few months. In fact, I hadn't expected him to get that large ever. To me, when he was a small one, he looked like some kind of a mutt. I mean, he looked like a mixed breed, and my gut feeling was that he would grow to be a medium-sized canine by the time he was done growing. Smeagle had passed that size while still clearly a puppy. When he would greet me playfully by this point, he often knocked me down, and one day I banged my hip up pretty badly. I know he didn't mean for that to happen, and I didn't hold it against him, but it was getting to be too much for me to keep him on my property. I was starting to wonder what to do about this. Should I get him into the backseat and drive him further out into the country? I cried a lot during that period. I knew how much I would miss him, but I didn't really want to get seriously injured by his increasingly vigorous playtime games. I was by this point afraid of his wild and out-of-control energy. He would get this crazy look on his face, and I would lock myself up inside, hoping that he didn't freak out on any of the neighbors' pets, or on any of the neighbors. But then one morning, Smeagle wasn't there when I brought him his breakfast. He didn't come back, and before noon I found a family of raccoons eating his Alpo. I half expected him back at any time, but I also felt like maybe he sensed as strongly as I had that it was his time to move on. I had helped him out since he had been separated from his real mom, but there really is only so much a human can do for a wild animal, and I had done all I could for Smeagle. After a few weeks of him not showing up, I felt certain I would never see Smeagle again. That chapter of my life was over. I got to raise a weird little puppy, but now he was probably off raising the next generation of cute and destructive little monster squirrel dogs. One afternoon, after I had pretty much moved on from all of this, a few years later on, I fell asleep in the woods under a tree behind my house reading my Kindle. I had this dream about being surrounded by big furry monsters, like the ones in Where the Wild Things Are but thinner. And they were all judging me and discussing my fate in their monster language, looking down on me as I slept on the grass under this big oak tree. In the dream, one of them reached out to touch me or to grab me, and I woke up with a start, my heart beating 1,000 beats a minute. I was relieved that the monsters were only a dream, but frightened to see that the afternoon was over, and it was getting dark quick. I grabbed my things and headed back home feeling more than a little panicked. I didn't fully understand why I was feeling so scared, but the woods I was so familiar with during the day looked very different in the waning orange light and the long dark shadows. I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling like I was being watched, and then one time, I did a double take because I thought I had actually seen who was following me. It wasn't a who, though. It was an it. It was a bear from what I could make out from the creature's silhouette. A bear walking upright, though, not one on all fours. I felt like I had to go to the ladies' room suddenly, which was not the feeling I expected to have. I tried to keep walking forward, but I found myself becoming panicked and uncoordinated. The next time I turned around, I could see that bear better. And there wasn't a bear after all. It was some kind of huge man-like wolf creature. I don't mean huge as in King Kong huge, but I mean this beast was a few feet taller than me at least. I had heard stories of the Michigan Dogman my entire life, but I had always thought that he was an old lumberjack story, and nothing to actually worry about. Looking at that beast and realizing what I was seeing, my knees got wobbly, and I felt like I was going to black out. I remember backing up to a tree so I could lean against it and try to breathe deeply. The panic was overtaking me, and I was seeing spots all around the edges of my vision. The Michigan monster Dogman kept coming closer and closer, and I found myself weeping and praying to God to let my family and friends know that I loved them, since I felt as though I was never going to see any of them ever again. The Dogman towered over me, and I just wept openly, shaking all over and accepting my fate. And when that beast reached me, his huge clawed hand reached toward me, and he embraced me? Embraced me? Well, this is weird, I thought. He's acting like he's trying to comfort me, not to eat me. His fur was scratchy and rough, so even as he tried to be gentle, it kinda hurt. But his rough, scratchy fur was gray, just like my little Smeagle's fur was. I wondered for a second if this was a relative of that puppy. And then I realized with a shock that this must be the puppy. He had gone from the size of a big rat to being 3 or 4 feet taller than me in just a few years. He looked like he had aged 3 decades, not 3 years. So that was the day I first realized that the crazy little violent puppy that I had raised was not an ordinary puppy after all. It was the offspring of a Dogman, a Michigan Dogman. No wonder he was so energetic. No wonder he was so wild. If I had known what Smeagle was when I first found him, would I have rescued him? Would I have sacrificed so much for him and forgiven him every misdeed? I'm not so sure. I mean, the Dogman comes with a pretty fierce reputation, you gotta admit. I might have cut my losses and driven him out to the deep woods the first week, if I had ever taken him in at all. It's hard to say, but I am glad things played out in the way they did. I continue to see Smeagle in the woods behind my home once or twice every year. I sometimes see him in the spring, but I've always seen him in August at least once each year. That seems to be the time of year when he hunts over here near me, from what I can tell. When we see each other, he comes directly to me and places one huge clawed paw on my shoulder. I reach up to stroke his rough fur, when I once had to lean down to do the same thing. It feels like quite an honor, and I always try to show him that I feel that way. We don't get to visit very often, but when we do, we make certain to honor the presence of the other. I won't say I miss Smeagle living here because we are too different to really see each other more than we actually do. But every time I see him, it's a very moving experience. And each time we part, we do so knowing that this might be the final farewell that we get to say to each other. I think that's the part of this that I am most grateful to Smeagle for. He's given me back a sense of the importance of everyday moments that I lost when I grew up. Whenever I'm with him, I am there in the moment. I have to be, or else the big doof will probably get me crushed or injured. Now I live every day like that. I say thank you for each new sunrise. Heck, I even say thank you for the cloudy mornings. But what's more important is that I feel the thanks deep down inside. I even say thanks for the aches and pains of getting older, as they remind me that at least I'm not dead yet. And that was a lesson taught to me by my Dogman baby boy. We want to say thanks with kindness and grace to today's EP named Pizza Face. That's right, this episode was made possible by one of our newer channel members who calls him or herself Pizza Face. Thanks, Pizza Face. If you'd like to help our channel out and get to see our secret uncensored Dogman episodes, you too can join for as little as 99 cents a month. And here to explain the details is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.